Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Amesey's Corner. How you all doing out there? So today I have a 10 list, the top 10 recall campaigns that I have personally been a part of. So I just want to start off by saying my voice is a little cracky. Got a bit of a sore throat. We're just getting to the end of the coldest winter up here in New England, and the show must go on. So, number 10, back in the day working at different manufacturers' dealerships, we had to do a lot of recalls, and there was just, it seemed like every month there was a new airbag system or SRS system code or recall that we'd have to perform. So my number 10 is just the various airbag over all manufacturers. They've all had issues, they've all had recalls. A lot of the airbag recalls are kept hush-hush. You might know recently we've had all those airbag recalls where that Tanaka, however it's pronounced, company, and the flying bits of metal in your face. But that's common that all manufacturers have some type of airbag recalls. If you guys knew just how many explosives were wrapped around you in a late model automobile, it kind of makes sense that that's a complicated system that is going to need reprogramming. Some parts may not work as well and crashes when they're out there. So number 10 is just all the various recall. I can't airbag recalls. I can't really hammer down any one that's more important than the other because they're all pretty important. Number 9, Isuzu rusted frame recall. There was a problem with the 98 to 2002 Isuzu rodeos. I think the Isuzu, pretty much every Isuzu had this issue where the frame would rot out where the rear axle connects to it. It would just rot out, and if you accelerated too hard or you hit the brakes hard or cornered real hard, that rear axle could twist right off the truck. And we were seeing these 4-year-old vehicles just rotting out. So the recall would have us put these braces and brackets. It was really just stamped steel brackets with U-bolts around the frame in various areas, so if it did rot out, the frame wouldn't just let the rear end. You'd still be able to control the vehicle. If it was rotted out to the point where the frame repair, the connectors wouldn't be able to support the frame, Isuzu would have bought the vehicle back from you. And I remember it was 50-50 back when I worked at Mazda Isuzu, and it seemed like 50% of the trucks that came in up here were just too far gone, and they would buy them back off the customer. Kind of a weird way to fix it, and it's something that seems to still be continuing. I know the Ford Aerostar, or Windstar rather, has a very similar campaign performed on it with very similar brackets on it. So rust issues, and I know Toyota will replace the frames in pretty much all of their pickup trucks. So that's number 9, the Isuzu rusted frame recall. Number 8, the 04 Mazda Miata soft top wrinkle recall. Now this is a recall, very little known recall. It only affected the Mazda Speed Miatas with the charcoal gray top. It would have a little wrinkle in the fabric. Nothing serious, but they were afraid that if you got on the highway it would start flapping and the top could fall off or rip off the car. I mentioned this recall because I had a 1990 Miata when this recall came out, and I was able to keep one of the old soft tops, and I was able to repair the wrinkle problem, and I used it on my own car. So yeah, that was a weird one, the Mazda soft top recall. I guess they had testing. One had ripped the top open and sucked the top off the car pretty much, and it something that you couldn't have happened to a customer. Number 7, and it goes right with that same car, the 04 Mazda Speed Miata's clutch chatter. When you let the clutch out, it would kind of grab suddenly, and it was called shatter. So we had to replace the clutches in all of those cars. And the end result, I was able to keep one of those clutches, sneak one of those clutches, and it went right into my car. I understood the problems with it. I understood that it could chatter. And funny thing, a couple of good hard launches fixed that clutch up fine. I never had a chatter problem with it in my older car. So, number 6 would be the Ford Ranger Mazda B truck fuel filler neck recall. in driving the truck, shake, rattle, and roll, it would wear out the fuel filler neck where it went over the frame rail and would cause fuel to leak when you filled it, fuel to leak when you took a hard, I want to say right-hand corner, the fuel would slosh out the leak. And the fix for that was they had us just wrap the tube, the filler neck, in thick rubber, and so I think it was some special hose clamps that we had to use to hold it on, and then there was a metal buffer that went on the frame. The kind of things that should be fixed in design and in testing from the factory. That was a really strange one to have to do. It was just the stuff they gave us was like they went to an arts and crafts store, found just some material and made a bunch of recall parts for it, and that was the B-truck filler neck recall. Number 5 would be the Mazda Trolley seatbelt recall. How many of you guys remember in the 90s those seatbelts where you open the door and that little the buckle would move and catch your hair, grab your ear and go down, and you'd close the door and it would come up with the seatbelt and strangle you? What a horrible, horrible design those were. Really complicated cable trolley system, and they were failing very soon after sale, and we had to go in and replace all of them. If any of you have struggled with a cable window regulator, it was like having 2 of those in one door, in both sides, and just having to fix those and get them timed right and get them to work correctly after the recall had you taken all the cables apart. They were all gummed up, messed up. You'd come out of it with this weird sticky grease all over you, just to make the most aggravating accessory to ever be put on a car. Boy, I hated those things. I don't know how many times I'd reach in just to start a car after an oil change, and that thing would get you by the neck and rip you up and choke you, trying to kill you. Boy, but having to make those work again after they stopped working in a recall campaign was pretty close to a nightmare, pretty close to a nightmare. So anyway, number 4, the Ford cruise control fires. Back in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, the Texas Instruments made the module for the cruise control. It was kind of a little computer and a vacuum can that would control vacuum to it, and something about it where the power went into it would overheat and could catch on fire. I remember seeing pictures from the recall. There were pictures of a few of these units that had caught on fire, and it looked like it was a pretty good fire right in the engine bay caused by your cruise control module. And you didn't have to use the cruise control for this to do this. It could just one day decide, I'm going to catch on fire today. So we had to do all the Mazda B trucks, the B2000, B2300, B3000, B4000, which are really just Rangers with different engines. Ford had to do it to their Rangers. We had to do it to our B trucks, and that was a big recall. There were a lot of cruise control modules. I think maybe out of all the recalls, I saw 2 that had evidence that they were heating up. You could see the plastic was just charred and bubbly. So that was an important one we had to do. Luckily, none of our fleet or any of the cars we sold from our dealership caught on fire, but there were a few that had, and we saw those pictures and cruise control fires. Number 3, and this is one I will never forget, the Isuzu head impact campaign. The Isuzu rodeos and the Isuzu troopers, it was deemed in a crash that your head would hit the sun visor, its clips, and the structure inside behind the headliner, and it could do a lot of damage to a person's head. So what we had to do is take the headliner down, take all the above console off. We had to take the visors down, all the clips down, and there were these brackets which had Phillips head screws torqued to like 80 foot-pounds on a Phillips head screw, so you couldn't take them out with a normal screwdriver. You had to use a hammer and an impact driver on the A-pillar, 2 screws each side, and you had to hit that thing hard. I can tell you that the trouble of swinging a hammer right at the windshield. I mean, an inch away from the windshield, maybe a ½ inch from the windshield. We had to swing a hammer, hit that tool to knock those screws loose. And it seemed like every other one, the windshield would just go and just crack one side to the other. You know, you have to take these 4 screws, both A-pillars, just so many windshields had to get taken out just because of that stupid campaign. You know, sometimes you'd slip with the hammer and the hammer would scuff the windshield and cause it to shatter. Sometimes just the act of hitting that tool and the screw would just shatter it up. You know, and then we had to put these little cardboard squares right in strategic positions so your head would hit the cardboard and keep you from hitting the hard, sharp metal brackets that were installed up there. The Isuzu head impact campaign, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget having a really new car come in, you know, a couple thousand, 10,000 miles on it, and you're friggin' swinging a hammer at the windshield. Boy, that one. 50-50. It was 50-50 that you'd have to do that recall campaign and then call the glass guy. Number 2, this comes from my days at Honda. We had the Honda Odysseys, which are known to have problematic transmissions. The trouble we were seeing back in the day is there wasn't enough lubrication going to certain parts in the upper areas of the transmission. And what would happen, the transmission would overheat and lock up. Something would go wrong, something would cock off, and it would seize the front wheels only at highway speeds. If you were on surface streets, the stop and go, the slower speeds, it would never happen. When you got going 70, 65, 70, 80 miles an hour on the interstate, the transmission would overheat and lock up like that, seize up both front wheels at 70 miles an hour. I think there were maybe a dozen cars that actually did this, locked right up. I don't believe there were any actual collisions caused, just I can imagine going that fast and having your front wheels stop. You got no control over that minivan. So the fix for that was we had to take a special rig. We had to take off some stuff on the transmission, the air box, some stuff to get to the transmission. There was a fill plug which we would use to fill the transmissions. We had to pull that plug off and visually inspect down inside of the hole to see any bluing on one of the drums. If there was any bluing at all, you had to replace the transmission. If the drum looked good and serviceable, we had to take a special digital camera and a special rig to hold that camera and take a picture down inside of the transmission from outside of the transmission to prove that that drum was at that time not scorched. And if it wasn't scorched, you take your picture, you'd catalog your information, and then there was a repair kit that took one of the tranny cooler lines and rerouted it into that fill hole so the cooled transmission fluid from the cooler would go onto that drum and stop it from happening. And it did stop the transmissions from locking up, but the trouble was obviously designed into the transmissions, and I believe that's why all of the Honda Odyssey transmission issues, even after this recall, are still present. The transmissions just wear out faster. Kind of seems like a theme with Honda and transmissions of the mid-2000s. It seems like the later cars, they really cured these problems, and I guess Honda transmissions have come a long way since I've worked on them, but just that Honda Odyssey tranny recall was just a real scary one. You know, I can imagine you got your minivan loaded up for a trip down the highway, you got your kids in the back, your wife in the seat, and 65, 70 miles an hour, you just lock up the front wheels. I can imagine that's a scary situation. Well, anyways, I'm going to skip the 3 honorable mentions because there are just so many recall campaigns that I'm sure you guys haven't heard of. And I'm going to get to the biggest one I've ever been a part of, and that would be the Ford Firestone tire recall. I'm sure all of you watching this remember that, hearing about that with the Ford Explorers. And I was at a Mazda dealer. We had the Mazda Navajo, which was a shorter wheelbase 2-door Explorer, which seemed to have even more trouble rolling over because of its shorter wheelbase than the longer trucks. They'd blow the tire and they'd kick out sideways quicker. So what was done was the recall contained 13 million tires had to be taken off of these trucks. This would be the Ford Rangers, the Mazda B trucks, the Ford Explorers, the Mazda Navajo, and a couple other odd vehicles that had these tires. I remember for weeks at a time when this recall came out. Weeks at a time, I did nothing but take tires, Firestone tires off the car and put whatever the recall deemed was allowable to put back on. Now, it didn't just stop with us taking the tires off. We had to take the tires off, record all the DOT numbers on the tires, and then the recall stipulated that we had to render each tire unusable. The way they wanted us to do that was to take a hole saw through the sidewall and cut out the DOT number, so the tire would no longer have a DOT number on it and would have a giant inch round hole in the sidewall. Eventually, it just got too hard to, it was just so many tires trying to drill those holes. They accepted us taking a box cutter and just cutting a 6-inch slice in the sidewall would render the tire unrepairable, and that's eventually what that recall ended up being, just box cutter the sidewalls and put them in to be recorded. I think in the beginning the tires were all collected to be brought back to Firestone, but the logistics of 13 million tires being brought to someplace just didn't click with them. So at a third of the way through the recall, they just had us dispose of the tires and charge the fee to dispose them from whoever took them, as long as we had sliced the sidewall. Now, the thing was, there was nothing physically wrong with 99% of these tires. What it would come down to is people would just drive their trucks with low tires. You know, you're supposed to check your tires every time you drive it. People would have a half flat tire on the back and they just keep driving. It would overheat the sidewalls and the sidewall would blow out. Because those trucks use such a tall tire, I don't remember off the top of my head, it's been a few years what sizes, but there was such a drop when those tires instantly deflated that would cause a loss of control. The tires themselves, as long as they were aired up properly, had a great service life. They were really good tires. And my father actually started, once they stopped taking the tires, my father started saving those tires for himself. He had his own B truck. He had a B4000, and he had a lifetime supply of tires from that recall. I know that's bad to do. I know nowadays that's probably as illegal as it can get, but my father's not with us anymore, so I'm comfortable telling you guys, because you're not going to go after a dead man over some used tires. Well, anyways, guys, my voice is starting to give out, starting to hurt a little bit, but that has been my top 10 auto recalls that I've been a part of. And also, I just want to add that if you guys have any automotive questions, leave them down in the comments and I'll answer them next week on my answer questions segment. So I gotta go drink some water, have some cup of tea, and try to get over this little chest congestion I have. So until next time, guys, keep it out of the cabbage.